Press the bell icon on YouTube and don't miss another update.
Hi, welcome to Economics. There have been many big headlines in the economy space in the last 1 week. The government has made a lot of announcements to try and boost growth. They have eased rules for FDI in India. But the one other headline that made a lot of news is the decision of the Reserve Bank of India to transfer 1.76 lakh crore to the central government or the Modi government. This has been called a windfall. Some economists and analysts have questioned it. The Congress and some other opposition parties have raised a hue and cry about it, saying that the Modi government has dipped into the funds of the RBI, and this sort of shakes the foundation of financial security of India. And the government has defended it by saying this is not the whim of the government to take money from the RBI. This has been recommended by the Bimal Jalan panel, which was specifically constituted to go into this question. And the RBI also has said its credibility or its security has not been hurt by this transfer. So there's a lot of confusion and complication in this issue, and we are none the wiser at the end of it all. But we have Ila Patnaik, our economist professor from NIPFP, our contributor, columnist. She has talked about it in the past, and she will try to give us some clarity on what exactly the RBI has done, the rights and wrongs of it, how has the RBI managed to sum up this amount, and what can we expect in the future. Ila, a lot of questions here. What is your first thought on what the RBI has done? Because this has remained in the headlines for the last 1 week.
So let's start with the legal position. The RBI board, according to the RBI Act that exists, RBI Act of 1934, according to that, the RBI
1934, before independence,
has the right to make this decision. That what do they transfer, what do they spend on, what do they hold back for provisions that are required for various reasons, and what do they then transfer to the central government. So in that sense, legally, absolutely, the RBI board had the right to do it. And actually, this was the fourth group that deliberated on the subject of reserves, because it's not in the law.
That is not something which is very well known, that this is the fourth group.
Yeah, so there have been other groups, Subramaniam, Thorat, Malegam, and then when the recommendations get accepted for a while, and then that term runs over, then again tensions arise. So this is something that has been a topic of discussion, a reason for tensions between the government and the RBI. I mean, I think a governor and a deputy governor resigned because of these tensions. And it's been going on for quite a while. So legally, it is not that what is done is wrong. This is what the Act says. I think actually we need to think further, that because this issue keeps coming back again and again, usually the arrangement that is made by other countries and what we should be doing for stability is to put it into the RBI Act and not leave it to the RBI board. Okay, so something that I've talked about and we've discussed in the past is that this is seigniorage. This is income or profit, call it whatever, that is earned by the RBI because it is performing the function that has been delegated to it by the sovereign. That is the function of creating money. It's not that it is a saver that has saved up money, and because of that, like you or I, or if you or I were to own government bonds, we'll get some returns on those bonds, and that is our income because we bought those bonds with our savings. Whereas what the RBI is doing is really fulfilling a sovereign function. It is buying bonds in order to issue currency, whether it is buying foreign exchange assets or whether it is buying domestic bonds. It is in order to fulfill that function. It prints money, and that power it has because of the power given to it by Parliament. and then it is not really its income. So I think we need to go back to the
basic
question.
So to simplify, you're saying that whatever the money that is lying with the Reserve Bank of India belongs to the sovereign, the state, the Indian state.
Yes, that's always the case. So
it's not like it's RBI's personal, fiefdom or its personal savings, like you.
Absolutely. So I'm trying to say that it is not that it is RBI's income. We are just calling it income because it is the interest that it earns.
RBI is the custodian.
It is doing it to fulfill a function that is given to it by the sovereign. It could be buying a government bond when it wants to do open market operations to change the liquidity conditions in the market. It buys bonds from whoever is holding it, the public, banks, insurance companies, and puts money back into the system. Now, the interest that it earns on those bonds, in many countries actually it's an entry that is reversed immediately. That at the end of the year, if the central bank has earned interest of 1,000 crore, then that would be reversed. Not that it is treated as its income. Okay. So
what happens to that?
So what happens to that is that it goes back to the government, because now what is happening is government is paying interest to RBI, and then that is being treated as income of the RBI. So I think we really need to go back to that question, and that is why even in the RBI Act, the 1934 Act, if the RBI decides to keep some money, it does so with the approval of the government, which wasn't taken, and that is why we keep coming back to this issue. So we need to go back to the law, because this problem has not ended. I mean, there's such a hue and cry, and this is going to keep coming back again and again. If you remember, right from 2015 or so, we've been talking about how much does RBI have, and the issue doesn't really get resolved.
We'll come back to the point about the RBI Act a little later, Ila. But the question also that is being asked is, the transfer this time has been much higher than what it used to be in the previous years, and everybody's calling it a windfall, stroke of luck, bonanza to the government, and we know the state of the finances of the government, the fiscal deficit dangers. So, are you surprised by the huge jump in the number?
So, RBI annual report is going to come out, and we're going to be able to see what exactly is happening. But if you think about how the money, how RBI gets this income or the interest income, then the more of domestic assets that it holds, the higher is the income. So if in 1 year it has bought a lot of foreign exchange reserves, then in that year, because US interest rates are lower, and because so suppose for me, I would have thought, or for you, or for any normal person, we would think, oh, I'm getting 2% returns because it is the dollar return, and then I'm getting another 3% or 4%, which is depreciation. In the case of RBI, what happens is that while they treat the returns on dollar returns as returns, but for depreciation, that is set aside into a revaluation reserve. Okay, just in case the rupee was to go appreciate and go back to its previous value, and called something as net non-monetary liabilities, NNML.
Okay.
So they don't really count that as income. So what happens is, if the RBI has dollar reserves, then it is counting it as a return of whatever 1 or 2% that it earns on US Treasury bills that it might be holding. While if it holds more of domestic government bonds, then the returns may be 6%, 7%. That is what it is earning. So we'll have to wait and see whether this time the ratio of net domestic assets to net foreign exchange assets is higher, because if it is, then perhaps that's one reason why income is higher. The second could be that the way they evaluate foreign exchange reserves, that could in the returns on foreign exchange assets, that could perhaps be different. But that's something we'll have to wait and see, and hopefully after the annual report we should be able to understand.
So this question of the government utilizing these funds or getting these funds, what are the ethical dilemmas there, because that even Arvind Subramanian had talked about what should be the reserve level of the RBI. That question has been debated. Now the Jalan panel has gone and made some recommendations. And does the Jalan panel recommendations answer our dilemma or the question for now? Will this debate end for now? Because he said it should hold for the next 5 years, or every 5 years you should revisit it. Or do you think it doesn't settle it, and you're talking about a change in the RBI Act?
So I think we need a change in the RBI Act so that, like other countries, we either fix the amount of capital, and that is something that I would have added revaluation reserves, those assets as well to it. Maybe you can have 1 lakh crore or 2 lakh crore. I don't think you need 6 lakh crore because the rupee is not going to appreciate to that level.
Yeah.
But whatever might be my personal views, but that could be something that the law can say, that there is a certain amount of capital. Or one could even have zero capital.
Yeah.
Now, while the RBI has said, and the Jalan committee has said, that look, it does happen that there are negative shocks, and therefore many central banks end up having zero capital. But if you notice, does not go on to say that then all those countries landed in crisis. It's not as if it is a big crisis that a central bank has negative or zero capital, because often the government steps in. So another alternative could be that you could say it doesn't need to hold capital, but sign an MOU with the government, where the government, or it could be in the law, that the government will step in and provided the capital that is required. So if the rupee appreciates and suddenly the RBI feels it needs a trillion rupees, then the government can step in and provide it with that money.
Last question, Ela. There is also, now that the government is going to get this 1.76 lakh crore, there is also a debate on how the government should utilize it. Should it spend it to pump prime the economy, or should it, keep it with itself to make up for its, revenue shortfalls? What is your thought on that?
So I think 90,000 crore was already budgeted. It was in the budget, which means you have another 60,000 crores more than what you expected. Yeah. And ideally it should be used to retire debt. In this case, I think it will be used to borrow less. So money is fungible. It is not as if this money is going to be utilized for one particular thing. It will go into the Consolidated Fund of India, and that would mean, given the current borrowing program, the government would borrow that much less.
So your fiscal deficit is sort of taken care of.
To some extent. To the extent of 60,000 crore, which people are arguing is the shortfall in tax. But given that for so many years the government was actually, if I may say, hoodwinked into thinking that its fiscal deficit is higher than what it actually was. It was borrowing more than what it should have been borrowing. Then perhaps the remaining amount could be used for repaying debt. So not just that, I would go ahead and argue that all those years when the government ended up borrowing more because it didn't know what was happening.
Thank you, Ela. I think the RBI report, which should come out soon, will give us much more clarity on this. But at the same time, I guess for another 10 to 12 months, we will see this debate settle down until the next, fiscal. I hope we have been able to bring more clarity on this very complicated and technical subject, the transfers between the RBI and the central government. Thank you for watching Elanomics. We'll be back with a new edition next week. Keep watching us.